Okay, welcome. Drink with James, episode 163. I have a question. Have you ever lived a day that felt like a week and like 3 days that felt like a month? This week has been incredibly intense. Obviously, I was like, I had Costa Rica, and then I came back. I was in the office for 4 days, and then I was in Bangladesh, and now back here. So I've kind of been like out of the office for a couple of weeks. Obviously difficult when I was in Bangladesh to kind of stay on top of email and everything. So everyone is needed to like let me know what the hell is going on and ask me 4,000 questions. Something that isn't discussed that often is, and I think I've suggested the book, A Hard Thing About Hard Things before, by Ben Horowitz. He's a venture capitalist, ran a business, ended up selling it for $1 billion or so. But he talks about, he has this chapter, if you call it a chapter, they're pretty short, a couple pages, on the struggle, and essentially talks about, is the most honest, I think, portrayal that I've seen of running a business, and he does not sugarcoat it in any way, and it's just it's a complete fucking nightmare. Every single day there is something going terribly wrong. It is your fault. You feel completely unprepared and unqualified to solve any of the problems, but nobody else can do it either. I think he talks about knowing that he should be fired, but there's not even anyone there to fire him, and being frustrated by that, being I just wish someone would come put me out of my fucking misery. I generally am a pretty optimistic guy, but I do think that once people are successful, they have this tendency to look back on those struggles and kind of flatten out the peaks and valleys a little bit, or focus on the peaks more than the valleys. But it is very difficult to be successful in any field, and whatever you consider success to be. If you're out there chasing it, I am with you. I understand how difficult it is, and I am 6.5 years into this business, and I can say it hasn't, the anxiety and stress hasn't gotten any better. It just, as the business grows, the problems get bigger, the solutions need to be bigger, the stakes are obviously higher. It's just it's a strange thing. But I was talking to an employee today as well, and I was like, if you're a competitive person, as I am, I view life as a big competition, which is obviously very unhealthy, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. That is my worldview. And I think what is so hard about trying to do something special and different and see the world, and have the world see that, and to give you money for it, and validate that, is that there aren't many competitions in life where you're competing against the entire fucking world, and where everyone in the race is probably some people are starting 10 miles ahead of you and are much better suited to the race you're running. I just think it's such a big game, and if we even zoom it in more and look at the influencer space, there's over 1 billion people on Instagram right now, and maybe the top 1% of that are the people who are getting brand deals and doing something, making a living off this. It's probably even less than 1%. So the immensity of who you're competing against and the odds against it actually working are staggering. And I think that if you've been at this for years and you've got 1,000 followers or 10,000 followers, I hope, one, that you don't stop pushing, but also understand, I just think how hard this stuff is, and now that it's become more valuable, now that you can make real money on it, the competition is only, it only increases, and the stakes are only higher, and it will only get harder and harder and harder, and that's what you have to look forward to in life is, constant battle, or you can have a more balanced and you can have a more balanced and healthy worldview and not feel the need to dominate everyone and everything in the world to achieve any sense of happiness, which if you can do that, hats off. I'm optimistic that things will work out for me. But I don't delude myself into thinking that it's going to be easy, or that it'll always be that much fun. I mean, I love my job. I can't wait to come to work. But it's not like I'm just working on fun projects all day. So I am a realist and an optimist, which I think often sounds like a pessimist. What else? We're doing a For You tonight, and I think we're going to try and record it. So there's going to be a podcast. So we're changing things up. Usually I just stand up there and run my mouth for an hour and a half or something, but we're bringing 3 influencers in, and we are going to have them answer some of the most popular Drink with James questions of all time. So we're going to get someone else's take on those questions. So it should be really interesting. I'm looking forward to it. Since this is a competition, maybe we can vote on who's smarter, me or the influencers who are on the panel. I'm not actually asking you to vote on that. You can personally email me if you'd like and tell me. But we'll have that podcast up, so I guess it's up now. I'm talking to you from the past, so in the future, that podcast is there where you find podcasts. Go listen to it. It's on the Drink with James channel. Okay, let's talk about chicken sandwiches, specifically fried chicken sandwiches, which I should say I'm personally not a huge fan of, strangely. I was raised in the South, but I was born in Queens, so I don't know if it's just something in my blood, but I eat a chicken sandwich, I eat fried chicken, I feel nothing except disgusting. If you've spent any time on the internet in the last few weeks, you've noticed that people with nothing better to do with their lives are talking about chicken sandwiches. And Popeyes released a chicken sandwich, and I think somehow it's now become a political issue because it's like Chick-fil-A versus Popeyes. Obviously, Chick-fil-A is historically backwards in their views on gay rights and human rights. And so while delicious, Chick-fil-A is canceled. And I think did Trump come out in support of Chick-fil-A? It's just what, how is this what I'm talking about? What a strange world we live in. Anyway, Popeyes releases this chicken sandwich. They can't keep them stocked. People are going crazy. Everyone's talking about it. The fast food joints are kind of going at each other's throats. But we tried today, am I right, to get one of these sandwiches. You can't get it. We're a month after they've released this sandwich. You still can't walk into a Popeyes. First of all, I wouldn't even know what the fuck a Popeyes is. But if I had somehow stumbled into one, I couldn't get a chicken sandwich. And I think my interest in this and why we're digging into it is just looking at, I think, one, the power the internet has, right? So obviously this has kind of taken off, especially on Twitter, and has become a thing and has sustained this buzz a month in to where you still can't get a sandwich, chicken sandwich. And you also can't really go on Twitter without seeing something about these chicken sandwiches every day. There's something happening. Popeyes, I think, has done a good job in kind of riding that wave. And so I was thinking about this and saying okay, well, nobody cares to see me sit around talking about chicken sandwiches. So like, what can you guys actually learn from this? And I wanted to kind of highlight something on a much smaller scale that has gone viral in the influencer space recently, which is our good friend Grace Atwood has, promoted this Amazon dress. I thought it was a nightgown because she always calls it the Amazon nightgown. It just looks like a nightgown. She's sold thousands of these things, and we actually had her in the office last night for something totally unrelated and recorded a little interview about it, which we're going to cut to, which also, like, not only do I have paper, but I'm cutting to interviews now. So let's cut to that. So for anyone that has followed Grace, who luckily was randomly coming to the office anyway today, so we commandeered you for a very short interview. Anyone who's followed you knows that you were talking a lot about this Amazon nightgown, and I think it is a kind of smaller version of what's going on with the chicken sandwiches, which is like strange that I think when I sat down to do Drink with James this week, I didn't think I'd be talking about nightgowns and chicken sandwiches, but...
You could eat a chicken sandwich in the nightgown because it's so unflattering.
Right, you could eat hundreds of chicken
hundreds
sandwiches.
of them.
But I wanted to kind of talk to you about first, like, how did that, I guess, for the people who don't follow Grace and haven't seen her talking
What are you doing? Follow me.
Yeah, first of all, haven't seen you talking about nightgowns. Tell us a little bit about, like, what is happening right now in your life and with these nightgowns.
So I've gotten over 5,000 new Instagram followers in the past week. I've mentioned my account doesn't really grow a lot. Like, I've got this very loyal following, and sometimes it grows a little, but like I've said before, I don't really care if I grow my Instagram. I just like my people. So it's been in Vogue, it was in Glamour, it was in what
Today
else?
Show?
It was on the Today Show. The Today Show put me on their Instagram. It was in the New York Post. I was in the print copy on the second page wearing this nightgown. I just had a call today with Inside Edition. We're going to go on and talk about it there.
So like,
it's crazy.
What is happening? So you posted about this $30 Amazon nightgown that you are wearing in the world.
Yeah, so I saw it on my friend Hitha Palapoo's newsletter, which she has this amazing newsletter called 5 Smart Reads. And I just bought it because I was like, this looks cute. It looked like something I saw at a vintage show at a current affair in Industry City. And it was like this $600 beautiful Indian nightgown thing. And my friend Natalie and I really wanted them. And I remember seeing this and being like, that looks like that thing I saw. So I bought 2 of them. This was back in March. And I wore it like a few times. I don't think I ever shot it for my blog. I wore it on vacation. Some girlfriends and I were in Mexico. And I was like, this is a great cover up, like no big deal. And then I wore it a few more times on my Instagram story. And I started to get a lot of questions, like, where's that from? And I was like, it's in my Amazon shop. You can buy it here, and like giving a link. And then girls started to tag me and DM me them wearing the nightgown. And that's where it really caught on. And I think it wasn't really anything to do with me that this took off. It was once I started sharing my audience wearing the nightgown. Everyone started sharing the nightgown with me. And that's when it kind of took off. And I had the idea to pitch it. I was going to pitch the cut, and they didn't write me back. But then my friend my friend Anna at Glamour reached out to me and was like, I want to interview you about this. And so I did. And then suddenly I was like, this is great. I'm in Glamour.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the Daily Mail picked it up. And once the Daily Mail picked it up, New York Post reached out.
Yeah.
Then Glamour and Hello Giggles and all these sites, Allure, picked it up from them.
So how many nightgowns have you sold, if you can share?
It's now about 1,500.
Okay, 1,500 nightgowns.
Yeah. You think that I would, like, the way that this, like, famousness, I'm not famous, but the fame that has come with this, you would think I designed this thing.
Right.
I'm also getting haters, like, coming at me for endorsing fast fashion and knockoffs. I'm like, dude, like, I bought this nightgown, like,
kind of a
I
joke.
didn't know. Like, I treat fast fashion as like dessert. Like, I indulge in it from time to time, but generally the price point I wear on my blog is much higher, and I really like to support smaller designers and quality. So buying the nightgown, I was like, it's just cute.
Yeah.
But girls love it, and I love that it makes people so happy.
So what is it that, like, I guess, I think virality is something that, like, a lot of brands chase, right? They want to they want to replicate that and be able to do it whenever they want. What do you think it is about this how many years have you been doing this?
Almost 10.
10 years, right? And you've had steady growth and you're consistent and you've been on the show
little
and we
bits
talked
here.
about just like how, this is a grind. It's like any job, it's a grind. This is the first thing that's just kind of like...
I've never been page 2 of the New York Post.
Kind of blown up. So like, can you, like, I'm sure you've thought about it. Like, do you have any reason or any insight why you think this is kind of taken off?
It's definitely the user-generated content. I think a big lesson that I learned and that I think other influencers can take away from this is featuring your readers wearing something. If people start tagging you in this, I know that you did on one of your Drink with James segments, you were like, don't do all these blind regrams. But what I would do is once a day, I would go through all of my DMs and I would share girls wearing the nightgown.
Right.
So
well, I think you're in an interesting position, right? And I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you're thinking about it. Of just like in this moment, right? Like you can't probably talk about this much in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it's having this moment and you probably want to ride it as long as you can without being super annoying. How are you balancing that?
Oh, I've stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
But everyone else is talking about it. I mean, I put it on Twitter when I got mentioned a few times, but mostly, I'm starting to think about what's next. But I think that the other reason this thing was so popular was it's $30. So it's not something that people have to think a lot about buying. And it comes in so many colors. At one point, it had 17 colorways. And it's anyone can wear it. Like it comes in an extra small through an XXL. If you have larger boobs, it's not going to work as well, but I think it just like looks cute on anyone. So it's not like you have to have this certain body type. It's not like it's a bandage dress or something. Like it looks cute on everyone, and it's just fun.
Will you be? I think last quick question. Will you be? Like, do you have anything that you will take from this experience, and will you be trying to, if not replicate exactly the amount of press and everything you're getting?
Press, no.
Have more things like this happen.
I think that anytime you try and make something viral, it's going to fail.
Yeah.
I think my biggest lesson is to find more ways to feature my audience on my site and on my social channels.
Because I think that's something influencers don't think about. Is like it's got to be pretty cool to be a reader, a fan for years, who doesn't have a big following, to put their money and buy something you've suggested, post it.
Yeah, and I hope people weren't just buying it to be reposted,
and
but I think they just liked it.
It's kind of cool, right? And then you start to feel like you're part of this community, and it's like, oh, you've seen now, 1,500 people buying it. I don't know how many times you've been tagged. Probably a good amount of those people have tagged you in it.
Yeah, I've stopped regramming them because I also was getting like, we get it.
Yeah.
You like this nightgown, and I'm like, okay, I know, I'm gonna chill. It's time to calm down.
Well, thank you. I don't know how we're going to cut to that, but thanks. That's
it was great to come back.
I think the big takeaway from this is internet culture. Like if you look at TikTok, right? TikTok is like almost entirely about memes, right? And I think the great thing about memes is the ability for everybody to participate in them, right? And so like with this chicken sandwich thing, it has allowed people to, one, make a bunch of funny jokes about chicken sandwiches, or just like chime in on what they think is the best chicken sandwich, which like apparently is something that everyone has an opinion on. And I think what Grace was saying was, she thinks this became such a thing because it was really cheap, so it was easy for people to participate, easy for them to buy this gown off Amazon. And then she was reposting her audience wearing it, and so it kind of encouraged joining into something, and it was something that instead of being a passive viewer or just like being a passenger in this case Grace's feed, they're participants in it, right? And so like it becomes this community thing, and at its best the internet does that. It like creates these communities, but I think increasingly, like as they scale and get bigger, they feel less like a community and more like a mob. But I think what memes can do is allow you to feel like you're part of this community. And so I think, if you're going to learn something from chicken sandwiches, it's like, think about what you can be doing to pull your community into the feed, to highlight the people who are following you, and create that sense that that by following you, they're kind of part of something, and they can actually participate in what you're doing and what you're talking about instead of just consuming it. So that's your chicken sandwich lesson for the day. If we ever can get our hands on this fucking sandwich, we will do that. And maybe I'll have Tim, drink a bunch of whiskey, and he can give you reviews as a fried chicken lover and as a deeply Southern man. He's probably more, he's probably better suited to do that review than I am.
As a former Chick-fil-A employee.
Former Chick-fil-A employee as well. Topic number 2 that I want to talk about is also not a question, but every year we send out a big deck to all of our clients talking about holidays. And a big part of this deck is that we survey influencers and ask them a bunch of questions about holiday, right? Like, when do they start planning it? Do they do gift guides, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We do this because we want our clients thinking about holiday, because I think nearly half of the advertising dollars in America are spent in Q4 to support holiday. If you don't know the kind of the way retail works during holiday, it is that, like, as far as sales go, each day is what they usually make in a week. Each week is usually what they make in a month. So every single day from around Thanksgiving through the 23rd of December is as important as a week, and the advertising budgets reflect that. So we send this deck out because we want our clients to spend their money with us, because that, we believe, is the best place for them to put their money. So to all my brands out there, if you haven't talked to our salespeople yet, you should. They're lovely and very intelligent, and they're waiting. So email us at sales@4.co or just james@4.co. So what do we learn from this? Couple interesting stats. One, and I'm sorry, I can't, like these glasses I have, I can't see up close. 73% of influencers limit the amount of sponsored posts during holidays to avoid saturation, and 46% charge a premium on holiday sponsored posts. So let's tie this back to chicken sandwiches real quick, right? I think one of the reasons the Popeyes thing has sustained and still been a thing is that it's hard to get, right? And scarcity creates interest. If we think about the influencer space and what could ruin it, right? Any market is built on supply and demand. So we could have a demand side failure, right? Like, brands could just say they're no longer that interested in influencers sponsored posts. There's a number of things that could cause that. Price is too high, it's not as effective as it used to be, some new shiny thing comes out that they're more interested in. So all of those things are threats, things that we are thinking about all the time at 4. Other thing that could ruin it is supply side, right? So a lot of times when there is a new market where you can make money, in the beginning there's not a lot of supply. Cut to the influencer space 5 years ago, there weren't that many influencers out there. There also wasn't a huge amount of demand, but there wasn't a lot of supply. As demand grew, people said, oh shit, there's a lot of money to be made here. So I am going to jump in and start doing this. Supply grows. Now, in the influencer space, those two things have been growing, simultaneously, and I would say demand is growing faster than supply is. There is still just, luckily, brands are continuing to increase their budgets and continuing to invest more in influencer marketing. But what is unique about this space is, and scares me, is that there is no scarcity baked into it, right? Like, with an influencer, you can create, and I don't know if this is too kind of technical, but you can create impressions out of nowhere, So, okay, let's talk about Vogue, right? Like, Vogue is selling advertising based on the amount of people that read it. They can't, and those readers are counted as impressions. Now, they can't just out of thin air create more impressions, but influencers can, right? Like, you can always post again. If you say, okay, I usually post 20 times a month, and you've posted your 20 times a month, and somebody comes along and says, I'll give you $5,000 to post again, you're gonna post again. And you're gonna do that again and again and again. So the supply is essentially limitless for influencers. And it hasn't happened yet, but a big concern of mine is if we don't bake scarcity into the space, then eventually prices just plummet, just fall, right? Because there's too much supply for the amount of demand there is. And where this is interesting with holiday is that it says 73% of influencers are limiting the amount of sponsored posts they're doing. So they are, in this time of year, creating some scarcity, which is, I think, super smart. And I think if you're not thinking about that as an influencer, if you're not thinking about how many sponsored posts you're willing to do during the holidays, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. And so it's not too early to kind of map out, take a look at the calendar, look how many days are on there that you're willing to do holiday posts. Think about the categories: beauty, skincare, fashion, CPG. Like, take all the categories of where your advertisers generally come from and think about how many posts inside those categories you are willing to do, and try and stick to that. And what's great about it is that if you set that and you say, this is what I'm going to do, you can create that scarcity. You can say, well, look, I'm only selling, let's say I'm going to sell 20 sponsored posts in the 2 months leading up to the holiday. I'm at 18. Now all of a sudden those last 2 might become a lot more expensive because I'm like saying, hey, legitimately, like, I set aside X amount that I'm going to do for this holiday season. I'm almost there. So, I have to increase my price X amount. I have to double it. Scarcity, creating scarcity allows that asset to become more valuable, right? Ferraris are more expensive than Hondas, yes, because they cost a lot more to make, but also because there's a lot less of them. And it's the scarcity of them that makes them valuable. So it's a good thing for you to be thinking about, certainly during the holidays, but also just in general. We talk about how at 4 we are tracking the percentage of your feed that's sponsored, and it's a metric that brands are increasingly interested in making sure we're working with people who have a low percentage of sponsored content in their feeds. So think about scarcity this year in the holidays. It is never too early to start planning out your holiday content calendar because brands will start reaching out, I'd say, in the next month to book those campaigns. Lastly, we have a question about Fashion Week, specifically, what can I do as an influencer if I am not in New York to cover Fashion Week or stay up to date with it? First, I think Fashion Week more than ever before is very skippable. And we're doing some research right now, and so next week we're going to talk about this and talk about the kind of macro trends a little bit more. My assumption is that audiences also are just not really interested in Fashion Week content. So we are doing a little study right now that we'll be able to talk about more next week and see if that is true or not. But I think one of the reasons, like, if I think about myself, right, if we're going to talk about the macro stuff next week, I'm going to just talk about, like, the way I feel about it. So when I first saw Fashion Week, I was living in New York and I would hear that Fashion Week was happening. I didn't really know what it was. Certainly I had no ability to find that out. I wasn't reading fashion magazines or anything, but I would notice that as I was working in Soho at the time, that there was a lot of really tall women walking around Soho. And so it must mean it's Fashion Week. And then as kind of social became more of a thing and Tumblr started sending Tumblr influencers, I don't know what they're called, Tumblr bloggers to Fashion Week. I saw Fashion Week kind of through the people I followed for the first time, and it was super exciting, right? Because it was this world that was really mysterious, and it was really difficult to get access to. It used to just be for editors and buyers, and it was like, it felt so like chic and unattainable, right? And so to see the kind of inner workings of that, and the parties and the shows and all the beautiful clothes and the beautiful people and backstage and how hectic that was, it was like really exciting the first time, the second time, the fifth time. I'm now on like, my 100th Fashion Week that I've been forced to watch on social media. And for me, each season is increasingly boring, right? Like it just is, it seems that we're talking about economics this week on the show. So let's use another economics term, which is just diminishing returns, right? The way my economics teacher first told me about diminishing returns is that like, if you open up a like bag of cookies and you eat that first cookie, that like each subsequent cookie is going to be like less appealing or something. Like it'll give you less joy each time. So there are diminishing returns each time you kind of engage with something. So for me, I'm so bored with Fashion Week content. I've seen it all before that like I just don't give a shit. And I think that most audiences are the same way. I think most audiences don't really care, and it's become so unrelatable and uninteresting, and it takes over Instagram for a month, and you just have to see a month of people going to shows and pretending to be like fashion critics, which is totally fine if that's your passion and you're super into it. I just don't think for most people their audience really cares about it, and certainly doesn't care about it for a month. And so I think like as an influencer, again, we've been talking about this idea of like educating, inspiring, or entertaining. And one of the things that's great about social is being able to see things you haven't seen before. But again, Fashion Week, you've just seen it so many times. Like this is the reason, remember when I was like on a tear last year about Positano, how bored I was with seeing photos from the Amalfi Coast? It's because I've seen it so many fucking times that it's like, how many more photos from the same restaurant, from the same boat, with someone sitting up there with the fucking peace sign up in front of, the Amalfi Coast? Like, how many times do I have to see that photo before the good Lord will finally let it stop and spare me? And I think there's a huge amount of power in not doing it, in not going, in not covering Fashion Week, and kind of being in juxtaposing your feed to kind of what everybody else is talking about. If you haven't seen the episode with Julia and Thomas from Gal Meets Glam, we talk about this, and she talks about how she felt a lot of pressure earlier in her career to go to Fashion Week and cover it, but never really enjoyed it, and now she skips it because she feels like for her audience, they don't care. Like they just don't, Fashion Week isn't interesting to them. They're not wearing those clothes. So, why would she spend a month covering, high fashion couture just because she's invited? And like, just because you're invited does not mean you have to go. If you really enjoy it and that's like, the content you want to make, go fucking crazy and do it. But if you're feeling pressure, if you're feeling like, oh, I don't feel like a legitimate influencer because I am not at Fashion Week, I think that is now more than ever just not the way to look at things, and just totally not true. And I would encourage all of you who are interested in skipping Fashion Week to do so. Take a trip, go somewhere else, show your followers something else. And if you have the ability to do that, if you have a big following and you can travel and do whatever the hell you want, I would maybe use that to my advantage and like specifically go on a trip during Fashion Week and talk about the fact that like you're skipping it, and like, you're not going to be showing people a bunch of terrible Insta story videos of another finale walking down the runway, because it is boring. And to my friends out there who are going to go to Fashion Week, who are passionate about covering that, I encourage you to step back before it starts and actually think about, how am I going to cover this in a way that is interesting? Maybe reach out to your audience, ask them what they want to see, because I think that you're asking a lot of your audience if you're going to do New York, London, Milan, and Paris, and you're going to do 3 to 5 shows a day. You're asking a lot of your audience to go on that ride with you, and I think it's worth checking in and thinking about how you want to cover that in a way that inspires, educates, or entertains. I think I have to do a For You now in 20 minutes. So that is all. I'm sorry I got so worked up about chicken sandwiches and quesadillas, but it's been a long day. So cheers.